Hi, I'm Danny Rich, and welcome to the Judgment Zone. If you've tried sharing your Christian faith with people around you, I bet that sooner or later you're going to run across that wild claim that Jesus never said he was God. Well, sadly for those who make that claim, they're just showing off their ignorance because Jesus did clearly claim to be God in a host of different ways. Just not in ways that maybe you understand, because Jesus didn't sit there with a bullhorn on the street corner going, "Hey folks, I'm God here, come down, bow down and worship and give me all your due." No, he didn't do something like that, because let's face it, if you saw that guy on the street, you'd cross over to the other side. No, it's an incredible thing. It's an incredible claim. Christ himself, well, let's say being God, knew that this was an incredible thing for people to handle. And they're not going to just buy into it just by making the claim. And so he did many things. There's fulfilled prophecy. There's the miracles he did, the lessons that he taught. And, of course, he raised himself from the dead. Something that he claimed ahead of time and did. But he definitely claimed to be God. But see, Jesus was a Jew from the first century, and he came to other first century Jews who had a very clear idea in their heads of who was God, what was due to God, how God was to be worshipped. And Jesus kind of upset the apple cart because he took all of those things and put them on himself, claiming to be the voice of God, claiming the authority of God in many ways, claiming the attributes of God. But oftentimes he would do so by speaking about himself in the third person. Instead of saying, "I have the authority to forgive sins," he would say, "The Son of Man has the authority to forgive sins." And then he would claim that title for himself. And what's incredible for people who are making the claim that Jesus never said he was God, well, no one told the first century leadership that Jesus wasn't claiming to be God, because let's face it, the Jewish leadership that wanted him dead and were crying for him to be crucified was because he claimed to be God. That was the blasphemy they accused him of. You being a man, make yourself equal to God. That's the blasphemy they claimed he had said. They understood his claims. Herod understood his claims, and he wanted Jesus performed for him. Pilate understood his claims and was fearful because he didn't know what was true or not. Unfortunately for Pilate, Pilate was more fearful of Rome and the mob outside than he was of the incarnate Lord standing in front of him. But Jesus did indeed make incredible claims. Here's just a couple off the top of my head. Let's talk about when the paralytic was lowered through the roof into the house to Jesus, and Jesus saw the faith of the men and the paralytic. He said, "Son, your sins are forgiven." And the scribes and Pharisees at that place sputtered. This is blasphemy. Why? Because he claimed the authority to forgive sins. And let's face it, I can't forgive you for something you've done to someone else. It doesn't work that way. If you go and cheat your brother or steal from a store, I can't go, "It's okay, I forgive you for that." It doesn't work that way because you didn't sin against me in that regard. See, sins can only be forgiven by those to whom that they were committed against. In this case, saying to him in that context, "Your sins are forgiven," he's claiming to be God. And what's more, Jesus took it and he upped the ante. He said, "So you will know that the Son of Man has the authority on earth to forgive sins." He's claiming to have the authority of God. He says, what's easier to say? "Your sins are forgiven," or "Rise up and walk"? And then he turned the paralytic. He said, "Rise up and walk." The paralytic got up, picked up his bed, and walked out with it. And thus Jesus was claiming authority over the physical things and the spiritual things by healing the body and forgiving the sins. That was audacious and it was incredible. And he did it in such a way that was audacious, but was more humble than going, "I'm God on earth, I forgive his sins, get up and walk and go." So we see the wisdom of the Lord in this, but it goes all the way through. Jesus claimed that he will be the judge of the living and the dead in the end. He will rise all men up to judgment. He claims that he's the one that's going to do it. He claims to own and command the hosts of angels. Again, these are things that belong to God and to God alone. He tells his followers, he says, where 2 or 3 of you are gathered in my name, there I am with you. He is claiming omnipresence and eternality because that was a promise given to all of his followers throughout time. No, Jesus made many, many bold, audacious claims of himself, claims that nobody else made in that age. No, and it really comes down to this, is that Jesus also did some other things. Jesus actually did claim to be God. He didn't use the word God because that wasn't what they said back then. He was into a dispute with the scribes and the Pharisees, and he said, Abraham rejoiced to see me. And they said, you're not even 50 years old. How you've not met Abraham? They were just incredulous that he would say such a statement. And he says, but verily, verily, truly, truly, I tell you this, before Abraham was, I am. See that I am that he said there? That, to the Jewish understanding, was the name of God, the name of the burning bush, the name of God speaking from the burning bush to Moses in the wilderness, who led the Jewish people out of Egypt, who led them through the wilderness, who led them into the promised land. No, he was claiming to be Yahweh Elohim, the Holy One of Israel, and there was no mistake about it. That was incredible, that was audacious. That was one of the boldest things he ever said, because that was incredible blasphemy to the Jews, unless he really was God. And when it goes beyond just what he claimed about himself, there's also the other little issue. The fact is that Jesus accepted worship as God. When he saved his disciples in the boat, they worshipped him. And this is something, again, in the first century context. He was accepting worship as God. He had just performed a miraculous, supernatural power over nature. And they worshipped him, and he accepted it. He did not rebuke them for it, because if he was a good rabbi and he wasn't God, that was blasphemy. And he should have called them out for it. When he was risen from the grave and he met the women by the tomb, they worshipped him. They clung to his feet and worshipped him, again in the same context, as God. And he accepted that. The week after his resurrection, Thomas had not yet seen him. He said, I won't believe until I see the marks in his hands and feet and put my hand into his side where he was pierced by the spear. And when Jesus did appear to him, and he handled him and saw that he was physically there, and he put his hand into Jesus' side, Thomas broke down and said, my Lord and my God. He called him God, and Jesus accepted that worship. So you have no one who says that Jesus didn't claim to be God knows what they're talking about. Now, we want to be gracious to them. But it really comes down to this, is that Jesus made these incredible statements and these incredible claims about himself. That was the reason why he was crucified. The leadership back then knew what he was saying. And you have to accept that is what he claimed about himself. Now, what you do with that is on you. As the old understanding goes, you can't really just take Jesus as a good teacher. Because if he was just a good teacher and he wasn't God as he claimed to be, he was either lying because he wasn't God and he knew it and he lied about it, which you can't be a good teacher. You're not a good moral man. You shouldn't be someone that people are following if you're lying like that. Or he wasn't God and didn't know it, which means he was insane. In which case, how could you be a good teacher if you're insane? The other option is he was God and he knew it, and that is what he claimed. So he was either one of 3 things. He was a liar, he was a lunatic, or he was the Lord incarnate. Now you have something to do about that. You can't come to Jesus and say, I'm going to pick this part of you and that part of you and cast out the stuff I don't like. He doesn't give you that option. He said, again, one of his incredible claims that puts the mark on his deity. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. None come to God the Father except by me. He claimed to be God and the only means of salvation and to be reconciled to God. There's no other way, according to Jesus. So you can't have him as a good teacher and reject him as God. Hi, if you've enjoyed this video, we ask that you would like it, share, and subscribe to our channel. We also would encourage you to make comments, give us suggestions for topics for the future, questions that you may have, and as always, we appreciate your prayers. So please, go in the love of Christ.